Hello and welcome to my channel on human design. Well, we've got some juicy questions for you, and we're going to go straight in there with a question from one of our regulars, Qis. And she asked a question about money and the material plane. Interesting question. This is what she asks. A question for the collective. In all your 27 years of human design, what is the fastest way to become successful in the material plane? Because I believe it wouldn't actually always be strategy and authority. As you are aware, lots of unhappy millionaires everywhere, more so living out the not self, chasing the dollar. But in this third D plane, especially in 2025, finances really do come very close to equaling happiness for security, survival, and family reasons. So to reframe the question, do you believe it would be financially healthy for people to explore a short-term, not self strategy for some quick financial gain? Perhaps a hybrid strategy with a blend of authentic design, strategy and authority, living after work or in the weekends. Okay, Curious. That's quite a question. I mean, look, the whole point of human design is to be able to sink into your natural way of making decisions, witness the life playing out as a result of that. Okay, look, I just need to make some money. I'm going to do this for a wage and that's it, you know? You can do that. I mean, that's not against your inner authority if it's something that you respond to as a generator, for example. But you might open to that if you need to in a material world where, yeah, we do need money. We do need food. We do need shelter. You know, we need to look after our physical body. It's not an easy thing to be on a material plane. You've also got to understand that money is not a natural thing. It is something that is imposed upon us. It isn't part of our nature to have to deal with money. What I would say is basically you follow your strategy and authority to move into something you love, you know, let the passion behind it, let the energy that comes through you for whatever it is be the thing that you make money with. However, you may not know what that is. A lot of people don't. A lot of people are trying to find that out. And in the meantime, you have to live. Correct response for a generator will take them wherever it takes them. It might be correct to go into a job where you are working for someone else for the short-term gain to get to the next step. And it's valid if you followed your strategy and authority. I think you need to get in the resources you need. You know, you need to move out of debt. You need to get a platform under you. This is just common sense. If you ignore that, if you go away into la-la land and your own ideas of whatever it may be and avoid all that, there will come a time when you probably wish you hadn't. You know, you've got to be really aware of the fact of the mind coming in and making the decision for you. I think trying to set up a strategy of a hybrid where you're, you know, not self-earning money then you come back to the true self and allow the witness to come through. You know, I can't really see that working. The process of human design is a kind of a full-time thing. It takes you into a different way of living the life. And as a result of that, you begin to attract different energies. You begin to be pulled in different directions because of the state that you're in, because you are listening to your inner authority. So yeah, that would be the way to live. And, you know, you will be supported in that, but you've got to be correct. If you're not correct, then how are you going to move into the life that is correct for you? You can't think yourself there. There are too many factors involved. You know, there's a kind of an ongoing mystery in the living of the life as well. So my advice would be to get the mind out of the way, to stay with strategy and authority, and you'll find your way in that. Be around other people where you can bounce off ideas. You can maybe sometimes when people are around you, you will recognize something in yourself that you never knew was such a passion. And someone might say to you, well, you could make money out of that. You know, people want to know about that. Really? yeah, really, might spark you to jump into it, whatever it is. So it's not about cutting off from the material world. It's about being in the material world and being yourself at the same time. And yes, it's a challenge. And yes, you may have to go from stepping stone to stepping stone before you get to the point where there is enough freedom for you to be able to move according to the kind of life that brings the quality that you need. Okay, that's the best I can do at the moment. Thank you for the question, Kewis. Our next question from Vita Christina is about psychological disorders. Dear Richard, I have a question for you. Is there a human design for different psychological personality disorders? I know it's a controversial topic and somewhat far-fetched, but I just got this idea. What if personality disorders are not determined just mostly by childhood trauma, but also by our human design? For example, I know a diagnosed borderline personality disorder that is also a projector with a completely empty identity center and channel of emoting, which makes so much sense for this personality disorder. Instability, lack of an identity, strong emotional fluctuations. Also, might there be a correlation to narcissism and an empty root center, as at the core of a narcissist is a feeling of deep insecurity, inadequacy, shame, and a feeling of not being safe in this world. I see that you have already done a very insightful video on narcissistic human design. And indeed, the person that I'm suspecting to be a narcissist has authoritarian gate 7, channel 2551, fixed ego center that has been broken in childhood, and also empty root center. Is there more for borderline, sociopathy, psychopathy, etc.? Well, Vita, with me, there is always more. And I can think of a number of different computations within the body graph that can make one think one has a psychological personality disorder. But I don't want to label them because, everyone is different. And the main thing is that people are here to live who they are in their nature. And yes, of course, trauma will be a heavy conditioning to break through, but you break through by coming back to your nature. So, for example, the person that you mentioned that has the channel of emoting and an open G center, if that channel of emoting is allowed to just be itself, then they can come to a very happy place, within themselves and within their world. If they're being labeled this and labeled that, and they're trying to fit in with something, a situation, an environment, a relationship that is not right for them, well, you get what you get. You're going to get a lot of emoting, you're going to get carried off by the white coats. So if we keep it within the realms of psychology and a mental disorder, then we're dealing with the head and ajna. And if you think about it, if people have a lot of different gates tied to different circuitry in there, even if they've got a fixed head and a fixed ajna, they're under pressure to think, and they may not trust their own thinking because it's thinking in different ways that are contradictory within themselves, which can, of course, lead to some incredible thoughts, and incredible things can come out of them. But if they're trying to be normal in that sense, they're not. They're different. We're all different. I mean, think about it. Being a reflector, for example, just the type alone is something that they will change throughout the month in very different ways. And people might think there's something wrong with them. We know there's nothing wrong with them. We know this is what happens. We explain it and get them to go into their process. So I'm not really comfortable with the labels that psychology gives people. I'm really not very comfortable with it. And I would rather people stay with human design than try to translate a psychological personality disorder into human design, because, we're already starting with a certain framework that, as you've seen for yourself, can be explained through the chart. And there are lots of different ones. I mean, you know, I could make a whole list. I could write a whole book about it, but I don't think it would be helpful. You know, it's better just people come to their own strategy and authority. They live their own life, and gradually the dissonance of the trauma begins to settle down. You know, we're not here to be trapped by the past our whole life. We have to work through it. We have to process it. We have to let it go. And it's easier to let it go when you're living your life. You know, once people are given a label, they, you know, they can cling to it, especially if they're an open G. You know, I've got this problem, you know, I'll always have this problem. This is what they said to me. Nah, I don't like it. So that's my answer to you. There's lots of different ways we could spin it, but I would rather just stay with human design. I think that is more beneficial. Okay, hopefully that was somewhat helpful. Thank you. And talking of a head and ajna center, I have another question from Qis. And she says, the crown chakra, I've heard 50% have it defined. All my friends who have defined crown chakra struggle to sleep, assuming the energy is always there mentally. The ones who do get to sleep easier either drink alcohol or smoke some green to put the mind at ease. I've suggested reading and Sudoku just before trying to sleep to release those last bits of mental energy. Do you have any general wisdom or tips for those with defined crown, or even anyone with the 61, 63, and 64 to navigate this plane? Thank you once again. Okay, well, thank you for the question. And in that question, I just want to be clear. You've called the head center the crown chakra. Again, I want to stay within the terminology of human design and call it the head center. The chakra system can be laid on top of human design to some degree, but it's not a perfect match. And I think it's misleading to mix the two disciplines. Because after all, a head center is pressurized to think. And yeah, it can be difficult to get to sleep, you know. I know those that often have the radio on in the background, so their minds are kind of listening, but they're horizontal, and there's still something for them to think about until they go to sleep. That's something that I've heard can really work. Something in the background where the mind can be activated, but it's in the background. It's not something they're focusing on. It's something they can focus on, but, you know, the energy will go if they're lying down. And remember, when we lie down, we are in another matrix. We're in the mammalian matrix. So the position of the body is also important. And if you're horizontal, the chances are you're going to go to sleep easier, especially with them if there's some kind of background stimulation. I personally wouldn't recommend Sudoku just before going to bed, because then, you know, you'll be locked into your mind focusing on, you know, trying to work out things with lots and lots of concepts. I think it would probably be a bit too busy, whereas a more passive taking in information, which they can focus on and then lose focus and catch focus and lose focus and then go to sleep, would probably be better. So that's my thoughts on that one. Thank you for the question again. All right, our final question is relating to a question I was answering last week regarding the open spleen and health and looking after themselves. Another regular, Alves, came in and asked this question. As a splenic projector, I always want to know more about how it is to be like a person with an undefined spleen. So I like the question from the viewer Marco Polo a lot. On that theme, if possible, Richard, could you tell us more about the health needs and detox, etc., of people with a defined spleen? I know we are supposed to be less vulnerable and look stronger, healthier, but I also remember Ra Uru saying that he had a defined spleen, so he looked healthy and strong, but one day he might just drop dead. I think he used those kind of words. Yes, he did. So what should we do as a defined spleen to make sure we are healthy and strong and not just look healthy and strong? What advice can you give us? It's a tricky one, because when you've got a fixed spleen, especially if there's a motor going into it, you know, you can process toxins easier. You are stronger in the sense that you can process the toxins and the impurities that come into the body. And also, you're not going to feel necessarily, you're not going to be feeling unhealthy. You know, you're not going to feel pain. I mean, I've got a very strong spleen. I rarely get ill, but when I do, it can be intense because I haven't been aware of any problem. You know, when you've got an undefined spleen, you know, you can be aware of all kinds of aches and pains and things that are getting worse. With a fixed spleen, it is more difficult. You're simply not aware of that. You go on taking it for granted, and that's the danger. And indeed, yes, Ra did suddenly drop dead. I mean, there were indications beforehand, but that is the way that he went. And it wouldn't surprise me if I went a similar way. So how do you look after yourself? You know, having good people around you that can say, you know, Richard, you really shouldn't eat that, or, you know, why don't you do this, or, you know, this would be fun, you know, whatever it may be, something that would bring me out of my own lack of awareness of health and into something that is healthy. So I constantly have 18th gate people suggesting this, that, and the other, you know, from detoxing heavy metals to taking in chlorophyll to all kinds of things. I mean, and I find it kind of fascinating. And when I do notice a big difference, well, then that is something. So a lot of the time, I'm not going to be picking up on if there's anything going wrong inside me. But I do listen to others. I do take good advice. I do give it a go. And my version of giving it a go, because I don't feel ill in any way, is that I will try different regimes and, you know, may not continue them all the time, you know, keeping with a regularity when I'm not being reminded that there's anything wrong is very difficult for me. And I just don't do it. But I'm sure that over the years, they've certainly helped. And when I have gone into regimes that have taken me into really using the body and getting physically strong through different things, it makes a great difference, and I feel much better. Okay, so we can feel much better when we do the right things for a healthy body. But we won't necessarily feel the lack of it if we don't. Another practical way we can check into what's going on with the body when we're not feeling the aches and pains or tiredness or whatever it may be that people go through is to get a full blood test. Because a full blood test, you might have to ask your doctor to do a full one. Normally they do a kind of a shortened version that doesn't give you enough information. If you demand a complete full blood test, there will be some parameters which are, according to the Western model, you know, more healthy and to stay within the parameters. And you'll see if you're outside of that or getting towards going outside of that. And then taking the supplements in order to bring that up to the correct level within the correct parameters. And that's something that I do every now and again and take note of the results. You know, you show me the science, you know, I check it out and I go, well, actually, that makes sense. Then we might become aware of things that we were not aware of. It has to be put in front of us, you know, put right in front of our face. What it does with me anyway. Another thing you can do for your health, I mean, this is for everybody, but just to understand, you know, detox is kind of necessary for all of us because of all the chemicals and all the chemtrails and all the EMF pollution that's out there. And I've mentioned several times on this channel about my experiments with mitigating the EMFs. And I do immediately feel more relieved when I turn the computer off, when I cloak the amount of EMF frequency coming towards me. That I do notice. So I notice, I don't notice it when I'm in it. You know, it's a kind of a fog, or I don't notice it as such. But when I turn it off, hey, nice one, nice one. So again, experimentation. I mean, I would say that, but experimentation and see. But that kind of thing you can pick up straight away with a spleen, and you certainly will as a projector. And I want you to think about the spleen in terms of what it is for health. You know, the more savory, salty things are better for us. You know, that is a more natural, the savory is more natural than the sweet for us. So if you're, you know, chasing a lot of sweet things and eating a lot of sweet things, then something is off, and the body will show you. You know, you'll get it reflected back if you're aware and if you care, which you may not. So that's a tip to remember. Another thing that you can go into is to think about what you're wearing. You know, if you're wearing 100% wool, 100% cotton, linen, you know, these are the fabrics that really boost our energy. And there are a lot of clothes that people wear that are incredibly toxic. So the information, knowing that, whether you're going to feel so different wearing it yourself, if you've got a fixed spleen, I mean, it certainly feels nice. But these kind, you know, knowing the information, knowing, well, this is what we need, and we're being affected by the outside. So we can change that. That's something we can add to our lifestyle. So that I would recommend. Also drinking water and clearing the body. Understand it's part of everyone. And despite what I was saying about the open spleen, you know, going to saunas and cleaning out that way, well, you can as well. I mean, why not? You might enjoy it, you know, that might, you know, and you'll feel better with the before and after. Again, it's an external test, because you go into a sauna, you know, you don't think you need to go into a sauna, but you go into one, and, you know, you come out afterwards, it's like, hey, I feel much, much better. The high contrast would be the kind of way I would go, to see what really works for you and what is needed in that moment. And think about the defined spleen, you know, that normally feels good most of the time. What if you take it to extremes? You know, what if you go on a very long walk, or, you know, you exert yourself in a way over time, and then you're going to feel the difference. Again, it's, you know, you've got to push out of the area where you're feeling secure and safe in order to expand into something else. You know, you'll still have the energy, you'll still feel good, but you'll feel better afterwards, and it'll be notably different afterwards. You know, when you do go through a big detox, when you do go for exertion physically, when you do get to the sunshine after being in the, you know, inside a lot, you know, there will be this well-being that will still come to you. You know, because after all, we are here also to feel good, but we can feel better than we normally do when we do the right things, or when we respond to something that really pulls us. We may not need to, but cumulatively, if we don't do something, you know, it will build up, and then, yeah, it's not good. I mean, you know, some would say it's a good way to die, but you know, it can lead to it's not necessarily going to die quick. But basically, if you're not really interested in health, you need the people outside you to talk to you, you know, to bring the information, to point out things. And, you know, they may well know far better than you what would be appropriate for you in terms of your health at that particular time. So listen to them and give it a go, see what happens, and see if you can get that before and after effect if you follow their advice. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I have to say on that one. So there you go. A few tips from a fixed spleen to a fixed spleen. I hope it's been useful. Thanks for the question. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, share, and subscribe, and I will be back again very soon with something completely different. Bye for now.